All right, so if you've ever glanced at the Forex market, you've seen it, right? Prices are just constantly flickering, moving all over the place. But how do you actually measure those tiny, tiny shifts? Well, today, we're going to break down the absolute bedrock, the fundamental unit of measurement in currency trading. Let's get right into it. So it really boils down to this one simple question. When a currency pair, let's say the euro versus the US dollar, makes a move, that change is usually, well, it's a fraction of a single cent. So how in the world are traders supposed to track their profits and losses on movements that are that microscopic? It seems almost impossible, doesn't it? Well, the answer is a tiny but incredibly powerful concept called the pip. Think of it as the secret weapon that brings some order to all that chaos of shifting currency values. And let me tell you, getting a handle on this, it's completely non-negotiable if you're serious about trading. So what is a pet, really? It's just the basic unit of measurement we use to talk about the change in value between two currencies. I mean, it's kind of like an inch on a ruler or a degree on a thermometer. It's that standardized go-to unit for the entire Forex market. Okay, let's look at a real example. Say the Euro USD pair moves from 1.1050 up to 1.1051. See that tiny little jump? That 0.0001 increase? That is exactly one pip. Pretty simple, right? That's the standard move we're all watching. Now, here's the thing. There's a general rule for pips, but there's also one huge exception you absolutely have to know. For almost every currency pair out there, the pip is that fourth decimal place we just saw. But whenever the Japanese yen is involved in a pair, the pip is actually the second decimal place. That's a super important distinction you've got to lock in. Okay, so pips are great. But what if you need to zoom in even further? What if you need to get even more precise? Well, for that, we need to meet the pip's tiny little sibling, the pipette. See, what happens is some brokers want to give traders an even more detailed, high-definition view of the price, so they'll add a fifth decimal place to their quotes, like that little 2 you see tacked on the end there. That extra digit, that's what we call a fractional pip. And that fractional pip, it has a name. We call it a pipette. You might also hear it called a point. They mean the same thing. And the math here is super easy. Don't worry. It's simply 1/10 of a regular pip. It's all about giving us that extra little bit of precision. So let's just nail this down with one more quick example. If the British pound against the US dollar goes from 1.30542 up to 1.30543, that super tiny 0.000001 change, that's one single pipette. See? We're just looking at one more level of detail. Okay, great. We can measure movement in pips and pipettes. But the big question is, what's that movement actually worth in real money? Now we're going to get into the good stuff and figure out how to put a price tag on a single pip. And don't worry, I promise this isn't going to be some crazy math class. Let's just walk through the logic with a USD/CAD example. First, you take the pip size, which is 0.0001, but it's in the counter currency. That's the second one in the pair, so Canadian dollars. Then you just divide that number by whatever the current exchange rate is. And what you get is the value of one pip, but now it's in the base currency, the first one, which is US dollars. Now that number you end up with is, well, it's tiny and kind of abstract, right? So the really important step is to see what this actually means in a real trade. Let's take that value and apply it to a pretty standard 10,000 unit trade and see what happens. Boom! There you have it. For that 10,000 unit trade, every single pip the price moves is worth about 98 US cents. Now that's a number we can actually understand and work with. It's not some weird decimal anymore. It's actual money. But hold on, we're not quite finished yet. There's one last really important step. We have to make this number relevant to you. That means we need to convert that pip value into whatever currency your trading account is actually in. So let's just ask the question. That 98 cents is great if your account is in US dollars. But what if it's not? What if your account is in, say, New Zealand dollars? How do you figure out what that pip is worth to your bottom line? Thankfully, the process is really simple. You just take the pip value we already calculated, that 98 US cents. Then you find the exchange rate for your account currency against the US dollar. In this case, that's the NZD/USD rate. You just do a quick division and you're there. And there you go. For someone with an account in New Zealand dollars, that exact same one pip move is worth around $1.24 NZD. We've basically just translated the market's movement into a language our own account can understand. Okay, so at this point, I know what you might be thinking. Wow, that's a lot of math. Am I really going to be sitting there with a calculator for every single trade? Well, let's get to what might be the most important and most reassuring part of this whole thing. Honestly, the source material says it best, so I'm just going to quote it. Do you really need to work all this out yourself? The answer is a big, fat no. Seriously, you can take a deep breath and relax. And the reason why is simple. Your broker's trading platform does all of this heavy lifting for you, automatically, in real time. The whole point of what we just went through isn't to turn you into a human calculator. The goal is for you to understand the concept behind the numbers that pop up on your screen. So, let's just boil it all down to what you really need to remember. A pip is your standard unit for price changes. A pipette is just a tenth of that, for a little more precision. The actual cash value of a pip depends on the currency pair, the exchange rate, and how big your trade is. But the most important thing, understanding the idea behind it all is the real key to understanding your trades. And that's pretty much it. You now get the fundamental way that movement and value are measured in the biggest market on the planet. So now that you know how it's all measured, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Thanks for watching.